The future of Belgium on the calendar, Ruby. It's an interesting topic. When Formula One announced that Belgium was extended, that we are going to keep going to Spa, everybody was hyped about it. Everybody liked that. But then they looked past the headline and they saw the dreaded race rotation scheme, the one that Stefano Domenicali said he was going to do, and he's doing it. We're not going to have a Belgian Grand Prix in 2028 and presumably not 2030 either. It's going to become every other year after 2027. We've already waxed lyrical about how special this race is, but it absolutely deserves to be on the calendar every year, in my opinion.
It does. And, this whole race rotational discussion, why are we rotating the races that everybody agrees are the great races? Why not, when we're looking at introducing new circuits, make those the rotational ones? Because then at least if it doesn't work, you can say, oh, it's okay. We're not going to do it next year. We'll go somewhere else. You know, make the race rotational system make sense, not take away the most iconic racing circuits from Formula One. But, we had a rotation between the German Grand Prix and the European Grand Prix historically. And, when obviously we've now lost Hockenheim, we've lost the Nürburgring, at least the Grand Prix version of it for Formula One. We've lost a lot of motorsport heritage in exchange for, oil baron countries and other ones that I won't say on this podcast because, let's not go down that route. But Spa has that historical element. It's challenging, it's fast, it's not an easy circuit. You get the challenge of the conditions because it's not consistent, and obviously, Formula One in the wet, that could be a whole podcast of its own. But there is definitely something I think that's like a misled decision in this area. Like someone has given the wrong briefing note to the people in the room making this decision because Spa deserves to be on the Formula One circuit for its entire existence, and it just makes no sense. All the drivers like it, all the teams like it. It's in the middle of Europe. What's wrong with Spa?
Money. They don't pay enough. Simple as that. That's what it is. We can sugarcoat it all we want, but that's the reality of it. We've lost Germany, we've lost France, we're losing Imola, we're losing the Netherlands. Gonna kind of lose Belgium, at least on an annual basis anyway. I mean, Spa being under threat is nothing new. There were a good few years in the 2000s when they didn't run a race here because of safety upgrades and stuff like that. And there is questions around the safety of the circuit. That's never going to go away. We saw the farcical race well, not even a race, but the event in 2022. We obviously saw Hubert tragically pass away in 2019. It is a dangerous track, but they've made changes to it since then, Tom. And you felt after seeing that, after the changes they've made at Eau Rouge, you thought, all right, well, maybe it's going to be here for a long term. And it is, but not every year. And we see races that come onto the calendar. I'm not going to name names again, but you already know the ones I'm talking about, where it's like, who actually looks forward to that? Who actually thinks, oh, I'm so glad we've got this race for the next 15 years? Like, Spa is just universally loved by everybody.
It is, yeah. I think I'm not gonna defend the decision whatsoever, but I'm gonna play devil's advocate in a world where Formula One are gonna be charging so much more for these events because they are so popular, and yes, it is all about money. I think I would rather have a Belgian Grand Prix every 2 years than have them go into administration because they can't afford the sanctioning fee. Now that doesn't mean that it's right that they get charged this ridiculous sanctioning fee. But it's a kind of circuit where it's unless they're going to do something to it like they did, which they've already done to be fair, but to a lesser degree, unless they do something to it like they did to the Österreich ring and change it into this what was the A1 ring and basically just lop a huge section off it to make it easier to maintain and a lot cheaper to maintain. There's not going to be any way that they can compete with these other venues that are completely flat. They can go wherever they want. They don't need to knock down houses and dig out thousands of tons of earth to increase runoff areas. They can just lay a new bit of tarmac down. They're always going to be fighting against that. So if they want to maintain the safety standards that Formula One dictate, which they absolutely should do, then I would rather have it every 2 years than have an unsafe track that gets cancelled overall because they can't afford it, or we dread to think we have another disaster and someone else was to perish at the track. So I would much rather, playing devil's advocate there. I can see why it's gone onto the rotation, but God, it still sucks.